Hello, hello. Good morning, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well. See another person trying to log on right now, so I'm going to give them another moment just so they can complete this. Okay. We have a lot of material to cover in the hour, so I'd like to begin. This is the Intermediate Report Designer Training Webinar, formerly known as AutoTag, now Report Designer. Today is Wednesday, August 15th, 2018. My name is Eric Johnson, and I will be your Windward training facilitator today. I'm a technical support engineer here at Windward. I've been here for a little over 6 months now. Maybe you've interacted with me already through help desk tickets. Well, welcome everyone. Okay, you may have noticed that when you logged into the GoToMeeting webinar, you have a toolbar. The arrow that you see on the screen is pointing to the raise your hand icon. So if anytime during the webinar you have a question or are experiencing technical difficulties, please feel free to click that button to ask your question or notify me of anything that's wrong. The prompts I have for questions in chat are on my other screen, so I may not see your question immediately. Usually I wait until the QA session at the end to answer questions, but I'll look now and again to see if anything has been raised. Again, this is the Intermediate Report Designer Training Webinar. So we're assuming that you've built some templates. They could have been very simple templates, that you've installed AutoTag, that you know how to use tags, that you know how to connect to your data source. You know enough about Report Designer to get you started. And you may have joined us last week for the basic Report Designer training. To give you an idea of the kind of machine I'm working on today, I'm using Windows 10 operating system, which is 64-bit. I'm also using Office 2016, 64-bit. And the version of AutoTag that I'm using is 15.2.345.0. And you can always find the latest downloads, the latest version on our downloads page. Okay, I want to give you a high-level overview of what we'll be discussing today. I'll go over some advanced features for the ForEach tag. We'll discuss conditional formatting, covering 2 types of conditional formatting. One where we're showing and hiding content using AutoTag tags, and a second type of conditional formatting that formats output based on conditions. We'll go over the equation editor. We'll show you how to add the sum function to a template. We'll discuss the if and switch tags and what the differences are. I'll show you an example of the import tag. And of course, the Q&A session is at the very end. So for the ForEach tag, let's review what it actually does. It does 3 things. First, it grabs a set of data, any set of data that you want to pull from your data source. Secondly, it loops through that set of data that you have selected to work with. And third, it repeats all the elements between the tags. For today, I'll show you the importance of where to place the beginning and ending for each tag, and show you the results of placing these tags in different ways. We'll also get into grouping data or nesting ForEach tags, and I'll show you how to group your data with the nested ForEach tags. Okay, we're now going to move away from the PowerPoint presentation, and I'm going to open up a blank Word document. Okay, the document has opened up on my other screen. I'm just going to drag it over. Let me maximize this, open up a blank Word. Okay. All right, to begin with, I'm going to go up here to the auto tag and click on this samples button. When I do this, it will open up our getting started guide. And within this getting started guide, we're going to be focusing on this sample templates section. And under this is our additional section. And within that, we have a couple of tag tutorials, SQL and XML. We're going to focus on the SQL for today. XML is the second greatest used, and JSON is the third. We don't quite have the tag tutorials for JSON yet, but we will be making them. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to focus on this tag tutorials SQL. And to begin with, we're going to start talking about the ForEach tag sample. So I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to go ahead and click on this. Okay, and that opens up our ForEach tag SQL sample, which is connected to our Northwind database so we can generate output. And we're going to focus on this example right here, this ForEach tag without a table. It is possible to use the ForEach tag without a table. Yes, it is, as you can see from the example. And below this is a ForEach tag within a table, where you have your ForEach tag, some alt tags in different columns, and your end ForEach tag beneath it. But I want to point out a couple of things. First, where you place the beginning and your ending ForEach tags is important. And second, why the placement is important when you loop through the data. So that's what we're going to be talking about right now. But before we do anything else, I'm going to go ahead and select this ForEach tag and look at the data that we're working with. So I'm going to go up here in the Auto Tag tab and click Preview. Okay, and as you can see here, we're returning the category ID, category name, description, and picture from our earlier webinar. This is all the information within the categories table. All right, now what is this alt tag that's next to the ForEach returning? So I'm going to go select it, click Preview. Okay, so this alt tag, we're going to be pulling the category ID from the categories table. And that's what we're going to be displaying in this alt tag. Now, what's this second alt tag doing? Let's go in and select it, click Preview. Okay, this alt tag is just pulling the category name from the category tables. And here you can see beverages, condiments, confections, and so forth. And then lastly, we have our end ForEach right below it. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the output so we can see what this sample looks like. Okay, over here on the left is our template, and over here on the right is our output. And for this first example, you'll notice here that we're just showing the category ID, a dash, and the category name. And each one of these categories is ending up on a different line. So how is this actually happening? Why is it inserting the next record on a separate line as opposed to right after the ending of the category name of the first record? So let's go back to our template. And the reason why it's displaying the records on separate lines is that we added our end for each on the very next line after this alt tag. So there's nothing after this alt tag right here, just all this white space. Then the ending for each tag is down here on the next line. So we can see this a little more closely to see what's happening. Then I go up here to the Home tab, and I'm going to turn on the Show Hiding format. Okay, with that turned on, you can see that right after the last alt tag is the paragraph marker. So we're providing a carriage return after the alt tags so we can add our end for each just below it. What if we took away this carriage return? Let's remove it and place that end for each right after the final alt tag. What will our output look like now? Go back at auto tag, click output, yes to save. Okay, now our output looks very different. So immediately after the first record, the 1-beverages, this is the first record, immediately after it, it starts the second record. There isn't even a space between the first and the second. You can see this in the template. After the alt tag, now is our end for each. Telling Report Designer to go back and display the next category ID, dash, and category name, and so on, all right next to each other. Then when it gets to the end, to the right margin, after displaying all the record, when displaying the record, it goes on to the next line and carries on. And it will do this across the page as well as down the page. So if this list was longer and it actually came to the end of the first page and had more to display, it would continue on to the next page, going left to right, displaying records. Okay, let's go ahead and change this back. I'll do a Control Z. Okay, so this is why it's important where you place your end for each tag. Everything between this ForEach and end for each tags are being repeated each time it iterates through the ForEach loop. And within this, there is that paragraph marker right after the final alt tag for the category name. All right, so that's what I wanted to show you with that example. And before we move on away from this ForEach tag sample, I like to point out the tag tree button. So over here, in the auto tag tab is this tag tree button. And this opens up our tag tree. And this is very helpful, especially when reviewing templates that you haven't seen before. It lets you know all the tags that are in the template. So I'm going to go ahead and expand on this main story. And the main story is for the main document. If I had tags within headers or footers, these would display separately. But these right here are all the ForEach tags that have been set up within this template. Let's now focus on this last ForEach tag. To help you out when you're trying to locate a specific tag, you can double-click any tag within this tag tree to go directly to where that tag is in the template. So I'm going to go ahead and double-click on this last ForEach tag, this customer loop. And when I do that, it brings me down here directly to that customer loop ForEach tag at the very bottom of the document. So this, again, helps when you've never seen the tag before. You can click on it and go directly to it. But now I want to expand this customer loop ForEach tag, all these different elements, and discuss its makeup a little bit. So here we have our outer ForEach tag, which is this customer loop. And we also have an inner ForEach tag, ForEach loop connected to the outer ForEach loop. And that inner ForEach loop is this ForEach. And this is where we're going to be talking about grouping. And we also have a couple other tags within this. We have our company name, alt tag. We have another alt tag within the inner ForEach. And we have an end ForEach tag. And this end ForEach tag relates to this beginning for this inner ForEach tag. And this outer ForEach tag relates to this last end ForEach tag relates to this outer customer loop ForEach tag. And directly below this is the property, the tag properties window. And normally, whenever you click on a tag, this would display a little screen for you, which contains two tabs. There would be a properties tab and also a query tab. And this is where you can view the query that's related to the tag. You could change the properties. This is the same thing as opening the more advanced tag editor, but this just gives you a quick snapshot of what's happening with the tag. Unfortunately, because of the webinar, this tag tree section doesn't display. I'm not exactly sure why, but if you were to open up Report Designer and clicked on one of these, you would see information down there in the tag properties. Sorry that it's not showing through the webinar. But I did check it earlier and it is working. Okay, back to the sample. So what's going on here? We have this outer ForEach tag and we want to group some data based on the company name. So let's preview the customer loop to see what we're working with. So here, the customer loop is just going to be returning 4 records, it looks like. Customer ID and customer name is what we're getting back from the data source. Okay, next thing, between this beginning and ending ForEach tag is the company name alt tag. Let's go ahead and preview this to see what we're displaying. And just like we see here in the name, we're just getting the company name from var name 10. Okay, next thing is another ForEach tag, this one right here, and this is our inner ForEach tag. Let's preview it to see what it's returning. So here it's just returning all the order IDs that pertain to a specific customer, as well as some other information, quite a bit of information. But again, main thing is it's got the order IDs for the customer ID. So let's say that you have a list of company names and you want to see all the orders for it as it goes through the list, this is exactly what we're doing right here. Here's all the orders for each of the customer name. Now let's take a look at this out tag and see what it's returning. And here, that's just going to display the order ID and nothing else. Now let's just go ahead and take a look at the output to see how this will look. So I'm going to go ahead and click output, say yes to save, split the screen, close the tag tree as it's not needed anymore. And over here on the right in our output, I'm going to scroll all the way down to that grouping example right there that we've been talking about. So we have our loop in the templates, and over here on the right, you can see the results of that loop. We have the number 1, the company name, and all the orders that are associated with that company name. Then it iterates to the next company and displays all the company names, the order IDs for that company name. And it continues on down through the company names displaying its order until it reaches the last of the records. So now let's look at this number 1 right here in the list. See how it's repeating this number 1 for each one of these companies? Here we are grouping the orders under specific company names. Let's go ahead and take a closer look at this. I'm going to close the output. So how do we tie this inner ForEach loop to this outer customer ForEach loop? So with this outer ForEach loop selected, I like to point out here in the ForEach Tag Properties section, this variable field. And this is currently set to var name 10. And this variable is what Report Designer uses to identify this ForEach loop. So let's just go ahead and remember var name 10. Okay, now I'm going to select this inner ForEach tag. I'll come up here and click on the wizard button. And this opens up our SQL wizard. And here in the center are all our columns that we're bringing back. I'm going to minimize that for the minute as we don't need that. We're not going to be talking about that right now. So how do we tie this inner ForEach loop with this outer ForEach loop? And we do that through this filter section. And you can see it's already set up for us here. So what we're doing is we're collecting the customer ID from the orders table, and we're setting that equal to the value of var name 10. And remember, var name 10 is just the variable name for this customer's loop. And we're having that equal to the customer ID from the var name 10 loop. So having the orders customer ID equal to the customer ID of the var name 10, we can utilize the primary keys and connect the outer loop to the inner loop. This outer loop to the inner loop. Now, if I click on this value and then click on this drop down, and I expand the var name 10, and this is just the var name 10 loop right here with all the things that I can connect to. And obviously, we've been discussing the customer loop, the customer ID. And you'll notice over here on the right in this data preview section that here we go. Here is the first customer ID, and we have all the orders that pertain to that customer ID. So this right here down in the filter section, this is how we're connecting the inner ForEach loop, the var name 10 customer ID, with our outer orders.customer ID for each loop. And that's how we're grouping. Okay. So I'm going to generate the output again so we can talk about and see what's going on. Okay, split the screen. Scroll all the way down here to the bottom. All right, now I just want to explain what is actually happening when we generate the output with the engine. Each report designer has a small .NET engine built into it. And what's happening is our engine is completely stripping out the data from your template, collects the data to be used, and then rebuilds from scratch, from top down, everything that's in your template. So what's happening here in this example, report designer is collecting all the data from that's in this customer loop, and all the data that's within this inner ForEach loop. It ties it together, and then when it produces the output, it says what's after this customer loop, and the first thing that comes next is this numbered list and the company name. Then what does it do? It sees this inner ForEach tag, so it grabs that data and displays the out tag from this inner loop. It will do this for all the order IDs that pertain to this custom company name. It will loop through showing everything between this beginning and ending ForEach tag. Then it will go on to the next line, and it will come across this ending ForEach tag. And this tells the engine just to go back to the beginning of the outer ForEach loop and collect the next record. And repeat the process all over again. Iterate through the loop, display the number list, company name, come across this inner ForEach loop, and display all the order IDs that associate with this company name. And then continue on to the next record until all of the customers and their order IDs have been displayed. So this just gives you an idea of how the engine is tearing down your template and rebuilding it from scratch after pulling all your data from your data source. So this is how you group your data using nested ForEach loops. I'm going to go ahead and close this output. And next thing I like to go over before leaving this sample is on this page above, right here. So we've been creating ForEach tags using row-based formatting. We're now going to focus on how to create ForEach tags using column-based formatting. The ForEach tag can be used for column major expansion. Now let me show you how to do this. So there are three things that are different when you want to create columns instead of rows. The example above, up here, is typical when creating row-based ForEach. We have our ForEach tag, a bunch of out tags within the table, and then our end ForEach tag is down here outside the table. And what it's going to do, it's going to loop through displaying all of these out tags. And then, as I said, the ForEach tag is out here, which is how we typically want to set this up. But in this next example, in this column-based example, the end ForEach tag is inside the table, as opposed to being outside as this typical setup up here. So I'm going to go ahead and preview this ForEach tag just to see what data we're working with. I preview often, always want to know what data I'm working with. And here we're just going to we're working with our categories table. We've seen this quite a bit. We have our category ID, category name, description, and picture. We're pulling all this information through this ForEach tag. All right, now what is this out tag going to display? Let's go ahead and preview it. And this out tag is just displaying the category name. So instead of creating a list top down of category names, we're going to create columns that go left to right across your page. So before we do that, let's go ahead and just take a look and see how this output looks right now with the column major expansion. Okay, split the screen. And let's scroll down to our column expansion example, and right here. So instead of going top down as we normally do, and as this table up here shows us, we're going left to right, expanding the table, creating new rows for each record we're processing. Also, I want to point out, when you place an end ForEach tag, like we did here, within a table, it should typically create a blank row at the very end of our list, right down here. But we're not seeing that blank row in our output right now. Let's look at why that's happening. So I'm going to go ahead and close the output. So there's a couple of ways to edit a tag. You can double click a tag, or you can click on the edit tag button up here in the auto tag tab. So I'm going to go ahead and select this end ForEach tag down here, and I'm going to click on this edit tag button. So the end ForEach tag is not used to query anything here. It's just used to tell Report Designer when to stop looping through the data and repeating the elements. But within this Properties tab, there's this Delete Row property attribute that I want to point out. And this is currently set equal to true. And this is why we're not showing that last blank row, because we have Delete Row set to true. Now, if I was to turn this off by simply double clicking in this field and change this to false and save this, what is our output now going to look like? I'm going to click Output, say yes to save, split the screen, and I'm going to scroll down to our example. Okay, so before we didn't have this blank row, but now we do. And that's just because we turned that property, the Delete Row property for our end ForEach tag over here, to false. Okay, the last thing that we need to do for column major expansion, first thing we did is put the end ForEach in the table, and the second thing we did was turned on the delete blank row. The last thing we need to do is to change the property value for the ForEach tag to create columns instead of rows. So I'm going to go ahead and double click on this ForEach tag right here to open up the tag editor. Now this window is a bit more robust than the tag properties through the tag tree, the one that I mentioned earlier that we couldn't see through the webinar. But this window, the tag editor, is a bit more robust than that. Here we have an actual preview button, and when I click on that, we can see the data that we're returning. Here's that category information. To the right of that is our wizard button, just like a button within the auto tag tab. And this allows you to see your SQL wizard. Then there's this equation button, which I'll show you a little later, that adds an equation for the tag. Then there's the next and previous buttons, which take you to the respective tags without actually exiting the tag editor. Over here on this left side, just like in our data bin, here's the tables, the views, and the stored procedures that we have access to. And over here in the center is our query window through this query tab. Now your query window is probably white. If you click within that window, if you right click within that window, there's this color scheme option. Now I'm using this base 16 ocean dark. Yours is probably plain, and I believe that is the normal. But now I'm going to go ahead and click on this properties tab. And this is where we're going to set the column-based expansion. And within the properties tab, you have a bunch of advanced properties. You have some standard properties. But I'm going to focus right now on this tags properties. And you'll notice this order attribute right here. And it's currently set to column. Now, if I was to click on this drop down, it gives you a couple of options. There's legacy, and legacy is what is used by default. Legacy isn't much different from row. It's the original way that we built the tag. The row attribute does a little more. If you wanted to delete a row with the end for each, you'll have to use this option. In our wiki page, there is some more information on how legacy is different from rows. If you want to get that information, please feel free to visit our wiki. But since we're expanding not by rows, but by columns, we'll want columns set here for the order. So now with columns selected, click Save Tag. And now you can see the output as it displays here, doing column expansion with this last blank row. So let's go ahead and change this end for each tag back. Then I double click this end for each tag. Let's expand this to make it easier to see. Double click this end for each tag. I'll go to the properties and I'll change the delete row attribute back to true. Let's save this. Now, when we generate output, we should still have the column major expansion, but this time no blank row at the end of the table. So 3 things for column-based expansion. Make sure your ForEach tag is set to column. Your end for each tag is within the table, and the delete row attribute of the end for each tag is set to true. All right, let's go back to the slides for a little bit. Okay. We talked about the legacy row column for each type. And we also talked about the delete row attribute, which deletes the row where the end for each tag is placed. Equation editor. So we have over 50 equations or functions available for you to use. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of them. So I'm going to go ahead and open up a sample template. And that opened on my other screen. I'm just going to slide it over. Okay, so here we're going to add a sum function so that we can create a total value of the sales amounts for the list of salespeople. This is a table right here of salespeople, sales amount. We have our ForEach tag that makes up this table, and it has a couple of alt tags in the different columns. And we have our end ForEach tag outside of the table. Typically, this is a typical setup for row-based expansions. Now, before we do anything, let's take a look at what's actually inside this ForEach sales loop. So I'm going to preview it. All right, and it looks like it's just returning the same things that we're showing in the alt tag: the salesperson, the call noms, leads generated, and the sales amount. All right, before we actually add that sum function, I want to show you that you can conditionally format things so that if you wanted to display red text for those salespeople who are not meeting their quota, show you how to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and double click the sales amount alt tag. And this opens up our tag editor. And I'm going to expand this var1, and this var1 just relates to our sales loop. Okay, I'm going to click on this properties tag. And in this tag section, there's this condition attribute. I'm going to expand this so you can see a little better. And you can see that there's already an equation set up for us. So with that selected, you'll have this ellipsis at the end of the line. And I'm going to go ahead and click on that right now. And what that does is it opens up our conditional formatting rule manager. So whenever I add an equation, or whenever you want to evaluate data, you want to begin with an equal sign, just like we see here. And then this condition is, the rest of the condition is $ bracket var name 1, and this var name 1 is just relating to this salesperson for each loop. And we're going to be looking at the sales amount from that loop. And we're checking, is that value of the sales amount less than 8,000? Okay, now that we have our equation built, what happens if we wanted to format, as we mentioned earlier, format in a certain way? Well, if I know the formatting code, I can enter it right here in this format field if I know the syntax. Or I can click on this wizard button right here, which opens up the format options. And here you have a bunch of different options for text. You can italicize the text, you can bold it, underline it, strike through it. You can change the text color. You can change the color of the back of the text. And since we're working with tables, you'll have this cell tab, and here you can format the border, line style, the line color, cell color, alignment. But we're just going to be only focusing on the text. So I'm going to go back to this text tab. And for this example, we're just going to change the text color for those sales amounts that are less than $8,000. And you do that by entering in the hex code, which you can see has been entered in right here. FF0000, that's the hex code for for red. Unfortunately, we don't have a color palette at this time. That's something that we want to add as an option. But for right now, you would have to enter in the hex color. And displaying the text in red, this is exactly what we want to show. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And here is our formatting. Formatting is set up for us right now based upon what we just entered in the wizard. And if we wanted to, we could add a new rule. We could delete rules. But this is all I want to do, is to show text in red for those sales amounts that are less than $8,000. So with this setup complete, I'm going to click OK. Save the tag. Click Output so we can see what this looks like. Okay, I'm going to turn off Show Hide Formatting. And as you can see, any sales amount that is less than $8,000 are now displayed in red. And those over 8 are just displayed in regular black. So this is one way to conditionally format an alt tag for output. Okay, now as I mentioned earlier, let's add a sum function to this template. So what if we want to total all of the sales amount within this table? How do we do that? Well, we'll need to create a new row in our table underneath this first row. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this N for each tag. And I just backspace, but you could also select it. I'm going to undo that. You could also select the tag and come up here and click on the delete button. Okay, now, like I said, we need to add a new row. So I'm going to click on this plus sign right here to create that new row. We're now going to do something what I told you not to do earlier when it comes to row-based templates. And this is a row-based template, as we're going to be creating records top-down, as we saw a little bit ago. And what we're going to do now is we're going to add the N for each tag inside the table. So I'm going to place my cursor in this second row in this leftmost column, and I'm going to go up to this tag button, and I'm going to add the N for each tag. Now, as we want to see the total, I'm going to add a little text here to be descriptive of what we're going to be seeing. And I would like to format it a little bit. So let's go ahead and bold this. And let's right format it. I'm sorry, right align it. Okay. Now, next thing I want to do is I want to add an alt tag under this sales amount for the total. Go back up here, click Alt. Okay, here we go. So with this alt tag added, I'm going to go ahead and double click it to open the tag editor. And this time I'm going to click on the equation button. And this opens up our insert function window. Here you have a list of different categories. There's date and time, math and trade, statistical, database, technological. Since we're working with our sum function, I'm going to go ahead and select math and trig. And these functions are in alphabetical order, so I'm going to scroll down to sum. And when I do that, you'll notice down here that there's a description of the function. The sum function adds all the numbers in a range of values. Just what we're looking to do. That's the function we want to work with. I'm going to click OK. And then here's the equation right here. We have our equal sign. Always start with an equal sign to evaluate, which Report Designer has done for us. Then there's our sum function and parentheses with nothing between them. So let's add to this equation. What are we going to sum up? Well, if we knew what we were going to sum up, we can enter that directly in the number 1 field right here. Or we can also click on this wizard button. When I do that, it opens up our SQL wizard. All right, so I've expanded the tables and the sales tables because this is the one that we're working with. So we want to take all the sales amounts and total it up. In order to do that, all we have to do is drag sales amount to the columns section right here in the middle. And now in our data preview, we have all our sales amounts, exactly what we want to sum up. And that's all you need to do is just drag the sales amount to the column section, click OK. And now you'll notice to the right of this number 1 field is the first value that's being returned. And there's also a grand total down here, not formatted, but we do have the grand total. Now our sum function right here has data in it. So what we're doing is we're pulling the sales amount from the sales table, and this is exactly what we want to do to sum up. So with this all set, I'm going to click OK. And again, here's our query that we just built through the equation editor here in the query tab. So I'm going to click Save Tag. And since it's going to print out the number value, let's go ahead and format this out tag. So I'm going to click in it and then click Select Tag so that I am selecting the whole tag. Go to the Home tag and let's bold this. Okay. Okay, we bolded it, but let's also just make sure that since this is a number, we're going to get a number value returned. So I'm going to go back to the Auto Tag tab, and with this selected, I'm going to click on the Format button. And just like in Excel, we can click on Currency, because we're formatting for the sales amount. We want 2 decimal places. Yes, negative numbers. Okay, let's apply this. Let's close. Okay, now when I click Output, okay, here's our table right here with our extra row. And since we added the end for each tag within the table, it's giving us this blank row right here. But we utilize that blank row by adding the grand total for the sales amounts. So I think this is a great sample for showing you how to conditionally format the text for certain values, and also for the certain values when they're less than 8,000, and also adding a sum function, one of the many functions within the equation editor that you can utilize to come up with the grand total right here. Okay, close that output. I just noticed the time. I'm running a little late today. Sorry about that. Got a couple more things, so if you can bear with me for a few minutes, we can get through this. All right, let's go back to our samples. Now I want to show you conditionally formatting using if tags and switch case tags. So I want to open up this if tag tutorial, which is the first row. And this will give us step-by-step instructions on how to utilize the if tag. And I'd like to look at this first example right here. Now, the if tag is perfect when you want to show or hide specific elements within your template based on some condition within your data. So let's go ahead and select this first if tag. Okay. So this first if tag is going to evaluate what's the condition set in it. And if it's true, that condition is true, it's going to display everything between this beginning and ending if tag. Right now, it's just this alt tag. And if it's false, it's going to skip over this alt tag and carry on and display what comes after this end for each tag. Let's take a look at this beginning if tag. What data are we actually evaluating here? All right, in this if tag, we're evaluating if 1 is less than 2. This is just a simple evaluation. Since 1 is less than 2, this is going to return true. So this means that it's going to display this alt tag. If it was false, it would have skipped this alt tag and displayed what comes next after the end if tag. Let's go ahead and take a look at the alt tag. What are we actually going to display if this is true? Preview it. So it's providing text that just states 1 is less than 2. Okay. Let's look at the output. Split the screen. And here for this first if tag, we're just simply displaying in blue 1 is less than 2. Exactly what we assume was going to happen looking at the if tag condition and the value that's displayed in the alt tag. Okay, now let's look at this next example. The output this next example right here. So the output is indicating that 3 is less than or equal to 4. Well, why is it showing that? So let's go ahead and preview this first if tag. And all we're doing here is we're evaluating if 3 is greater than 4. Plus 3 is not greater than 4, so this is going to evaluate to false. Since this first if tag is evaluating to false, Report Designer is going to skip this first alt tag and move to this else tag. And it'll provide everything after the this else tag to this end if tag. Right now, it's just simply an alt tag, but we could have showed and hide other things like another table, text, a whole document. Say if you need to display certain information on states, California needs to display more information on some of its documents. automotive documents than other states. So you could set a condition if California display information. But again, right now we're just only displaying a simple alt tag. Doesn't matter what comes between these if and end if tags. We're just going to show or hide certain elements of your template based on this conditional format. So if we were to preview this alt tag after this else tag, and that's just because this if tag is going to evaluate to false. So this alt tag will display, and this will only display 3 is less than or equal to 4, which is exactly what we see right here in the output. So if this first if tag were to evaluate to true, this alt tag right here would display instead. So let's just preview it to see what it would have displayed, and it's showing 3 is greater than 4. And as you can see here in our output, we are not displaying that. So we are displaying just this alt tag after the else tag. So that's the if tag, and you'll want to use the if tags if you have 1 or 2 conditions or choices that you want to evaluate. But what if you have 3 or more conditions that you want to evaluate to? You can nest if tags, like you see right here. We have an if tag, an else tag, another if tag. But instead of nesting if tags, we suggest using the switch case tags. Let's go ahead and take a look at that example. So I'm going to go back to the samples. Again, it's an open the Getting Started guide. And there's a couple of switch tags. There's this one and the switch tag 2. I'm going to open up the second one as it contains a little more information, stuff we want to really point out. So here we have another table containing customer information. Go ahead and preview this customer for each loop. And here we're returning customer ID, title, first name, middle name, last name, quite a bit of information. We're also then going to be displaying from that information collected from this customer for each loop. We're going to display the first name, last name, address, city, state, postal code, all through alt tags. But this country column is a little different. And this is where the switch tag has been added. And all the switch tag does it just tells the report designer when to stop evaluating case tags. So here we have our beginning switch tag and our ending switch tags. And then these are all our case tags right here, which if you look closely, you'll see that it's a slightly lighter shade of red than the switch tag. So these case tags are evaluating the country. And it's seeing that does the country equal Canada? And if it does, display the Canadian flag. Let's go ahead and take a look at the value that we're actually evaluating here in this Canada case tag. So I'm going to go ahead and select. I'm actually going to double click it this time. And what we're doing here is we're checking for the country region name from var name 1, and var name 1 is just the name of this customer loop. So we're checking if the country region name equals Canada. And if it does equal Canada, we're just going to display the Canadian flag. We'll then do this for the rest of the countries. If the country region name does not equal Canada, it will then check if that country region name equals US. If it does, it'll display the United States flag. If it doesn't, it'll check, does it equal Mexico? If it does, it'll display the Mexican flags. And lastly, check if the country region is Australia. And if it is, it'll display the Australian flag. And so as soon as it meets one of these cases, for example, country region name is Canada, it will display the flag and actually exit the switch. Then it'll move on to the next item in the ForEach, the next item in the list, which is this ending ForEach tag right here. And that just tells report designer to loop again through, displaying first name, last name, address, city, state, postal code, and then checking to see which country region name is used, what value is for the country region name, and display its flag, and only its flag, and then exit the switch, go to the next thing, and ForEach, and do the next record. So let's go ahead and look at the output to see what we're actually displaying. And like I mentioned earlier, here we have our name, the person is within Australia, so we're showing the Australian flag. And if I scroll down, we'll see Lauren Walker from Washington and U.S. flags. And we can scroll down and keep on seeing different people from different countries. And each one of these are only displaying one flag. So here we're evaluating 4 case tags. So there's 4 questions or 4 conditions that we're asking to show or hide certain values based on the customer's country. And right now, we're just showing or hiding this flag image for each record. So that's the switch case tag. And last thing I want to show you is the import tag, and this will be quick. Close this output. Let's go ahead and go back to opening the Getting Started guide through the samples button. And we have 3 import tag samples. There's the import tag HTML, import tag image. I'm going to select this first one as it gives us a little of everything of the import tags. All right. So it looks like we're going to be importing an image file. We're going to be importing a PDF, docx, text file, and also an HTML file. So let's go ahead and look at the output to see what we're actually returning. Okay. All right. Well, first thing I want to point out is that what you see in the template right here is just an image preview. This is actually a tag. If I were to double click on this, you'll notice that it opens our tag editor, our input tag editor for our input tag. And you can see the path to our Windward2.png file that's being returned. So this image that we see right here is just a preview in the template, so you can see the image size and layout upon output. Okay, you may notice that we're not importing anything right here for PDF. And that's because the only way that you can import PDF is by outputting to PDF. So if I were to output to PDF instead of Word, this would display the PDF input right here. So main point about this is anytime you're trying to import PDF, you have to output the PDF. If I were to output PDF. I'll show you that quickly. And here you can see the PDF file. Okay, let's go back to the slides for a minute to make sure I didn't miss out on anything. Again, sorry, went over a little. Okay, we discussed the F tag, and I showed you that the F tag and how it evaluates when it's true, and shows everything between the beginning and F tags. If you have multiple evaluations of conditions that you're trying to check against, for instance, 3 or more, you'll want to use the switch case tags. You may want to take a screen print of this while we're on this slide, as these are the resources that you can utilize. If you want to look up anything, you can always, if you want to look up anything for yourself, you can always access our Windward wiki, which is located at wiki.windward.net. We're actually in the process of creating a new knowledge base. It is now public. We have some articles in there. We don't have everything. We're still in the process of transferring everything over. But if you do want to check out the new knowledge base, you can find it at ohana.windwardstudios.com. If you want to reach our user center, which contains a lot of valuable information, how to enter a support ticket, training materials, you can do that at windwardstudios.com/user-support-center. If you can't find what you're looking for, you can always reach out to our amazing support team at support.windwardstudios.com, or you can also email them at support@windwardstudios.com. So if you have a question that you can't find the answer to, go ahead and contact our support team. If you want to retrieve your license key, you can do that at our store.windward.net. And if you want any changes or have any feature requests that you want added to the engine or report designer, you can do this at ideas.windward.net. Okay, well, there's going to be a survey at the end of this webinar. Please feel free to fill it out truthfully. Any feedback that you can provide will help me and the attendees of the next webinar. Let's go ahead and look at your questions. Let's see if I can answer some of them for you. We did have one question. And that question is, can you use the equation editor to set up multiple functions? You can't only use the equation editor. Let me rephrase that. Let's open up a document. So when you use the equation editor, let me just go ahead and connect to something. Create a ForEach Tag. Okay. Now, if you wanted to set up multiple functions in a query, what you could do is you could use the equation editor to build your first function. I've had an example before where someone wanted to concatenate two different strings and then encode it in a specific way. So what I suggested they do is come in here and use the concatenation function. Set it up, giving it the two things. I'm just going to use an example. Let's concatenate the category ID with the category name. Okay, and that'll set up the concatenate function for you. So when you click OK, you have this right here. I'd suggest copying that to a notepad. I have one already set up for me on my other screen. So I just added that. And then I suggested to go back in and do the second function to see how it's formatted. They only wanted to encode, URL encode, so had them do that, had them enter a value, do tiger name again. And now you see the format of the new function, and that's the outer function. And here we're just going to pass it one value. So I'm going to delete that one value. And then I'm going to go back and paste in, and within those parentheses, the function that I created earlier, the concatenate function. So you can't use the equation editor to create a query that has two functions, two separate functions. But through the equation editor, you can learn how those functions are structured. The URL encode only required one parameter, while the concatenate requires two. Here is the first one for the concatenate, and here's the second. So it shows you how, using the equation editor, you can learn how to set up a query that contains multiple functions. Good question. Thank you for asking that. Okay, that was the only question at this time. So I want to thank you all for joining. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and goodbye now.